You can't go further with values-based leadership, authentic leadership, and still being in this pyramid power structure.
Grüezi miteinander. Today, the Days of Change podcast connects to Switzerland, a beautiful country which has always been independent as far as I know, a country of proud people with a strong republican tradition. Think of Wilhelm Tell, think of Johanna Spiri and Heidi, think of D.G. Bobo or Joseph Ackermann, and you have some cornerstones of what describes Swiss culture and identity: movements, mountains, music, and money. Hopefully there won't be a shitstorm following this introduction, or my guest will hit me. And of course, how I just described the country has been totally ignorant, because this morning I read a report published by The Economist saying that Switzerland ranks second after Finland in providing future skills education. So my image is totally biased and wrong. It's probably the old German inferior complex vis-a-vis the smaller but economically strong and stable neighbor. With my guest today, I want to talk about whether Karl Marx was right by saying that being determines consciousness, meaning whether for the big digital transformation you first need to work on the mindset of the people or on the structures of the company, or whether this is a weird question. We want to look at the potential of the new governance models which are out there, like holacracy and sociocracy, and see whether organizations can align profit and workplace satisfaction, or whether this is another big hoax. We will probably branch out to the big question of whether a better world is possible, and if so, how we can contribute to this dream. My guest today is Daniel Sigrist, and he joins us from Luzern. I've worked together with him in delivering training courses for leaders who want to prepare themselves for the big transformation. He started off as a clerk in a bank where he grew up into leadership positions. His life took a turn when he left the path that was obviously determined for him, and he became an advisor for digital and agile change. I don't know how that happened. Let's find out. Daniel helped Swisscom and other companies to reform fundamentally, and for me, he's one of the profoundest analysts of the corporate changes that are needed in order to meet the challenges of the still early 21st century. He's also a gifted musician, so there's a lot to talk about, but let's get to all of that one by one. Hoi, Daniel, it's good to have you here in the show today.
Joe, Holger, nice to be here.
And let's not go into Schweizerdeutsch today.
I liked how you squeezed in some Swiss German. That's nice.
Well, my wife told me before you would be very offended.
No, I'm not.
Daniel, we agreed beforehand that we will play the digital bullshit bingo that I actually haven't played with my guest for the last 5 or 6 episodes, but I think we'll have a lot of material in that bingo, which our listeners can find on our website, which is changedays.com/podcast. I've listed all the buzzwords that are floating around, and I'm pretty sure we'll have multiple opportunities to shout bingo during our conversation. Okay?
Yeah, I forgot in your intro, I guess there were several already in there, but I forgot to take notes. So we start playing now, and I'll be prepared.
That's fine. Okay, I'll start now. Daniel, as a human being, what are you proud of, and what is it that you still want to master? Let's start with the first question. What have you achieved that you're proud of?
Wow, that's a simple question for a start.
Sure, always.
No, it's not. What am I proud of? I think that I, at my age, somehow, managed to live the life I want to be and to feel really in control of. It's not like I can do what I want in a way of I don't care. It's more in I can really do what I want and take decisions. And if I don't want to go somewhere or take a path that doesn't kind of suit me, I don't need to. So this really self-consciousness I developed and this self-confidence, I think that's what I'm proud about, because that wasn't like that all my life. Of course, when I was growing up, I had some struggles and stuff like I guess everyone has. And so here I am and feeling really good for the last, I don't know how many years. And this is a very good feeling I'm proud of.
That sounds great. And you mentioned your young age, and that sounds really like you had a path behind you. So my second question was, what is it that you are still struggling with?
Well, I have to admit, one thing that's bothering me a bit, and it may sound weird, is that I already am where I imagined I would be, like also professionally in my work in, I don't know, maybe 10 years from now. So what do I do next? Where do I go? What I know there's a lot of things to learn still, and many paths to develop. There's many things I would like to grow and master, and then just to be balanced. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. You mentioned already a little bit of your life story, and I would like to go a little bit into that. As far as I know, you grew up in a small village in the foothills of the Swiss mountains, and then you went to the bank. I mean, looking at your resume, I can see you as a 22 years old young man with a leather briefcase and a homemade sandwich wrapped in paper, and entering the building of a provincial branch office of a Swiss bank, which probably was deeply rooted in traditions, all down to earth. Is that what describes you at your younger age, or were you rebellious at the time already?
Somehow I wasn't that rebellious. I never pictured myself as a rebel. But then again, the suitcase and what did you mention? A sandwich?
A sandwich wrapped in paper.
Well, this is really deep in Bernese Oberland, so there's not many takeaways, or I don't know what urban lifestyle would be. Maybe my being a rebel at that time was that I didn't wear a suit like all day, and I usually I would wear a sweater to go to work. I think I was good at my job, and that's also why they elected me as being a team leader. But there was always this feeling that it's not really the place where I will be for, I don't know, the rest of my life. It's not really me, like on a personal level, working in a bank.
How did this transition to somebody who supports organizations in deep transformation processes happen? Was there a single moment, or was it a longer process?
It was certainly a longer process. Most important things, if I look back, was probably when I quit my job at the bank and I went to study psychology. So I studied applied psychology at the University of Applied Sciences. But that didn't just happen like that. There was like a process for, I don't know, consciously for 2 years, deciding, should I leave, should I stay? But unconsciously, it took much longer, I guess. From there, I was just a total, I don't know, new field that opened up to me. And step by step, I went somewhere, and it went much faster than I ever anticipated. And I guess you can't plan such things. You just need to follow where is something you feel attracted to, and then you follow that path.
Let's move into our subject slowly. I have been participating in the online discussion on digital transformation for the last 2 or 3 years or so. And I'm still struggling to give a clear description of what that actually is. Can we maybe together make an attempt? How do you understand the challenge that organizations are facing nowadays?
What I see is, for many organizations, they approach this differently because they have different realities, and they have different contexts and stuff. I guess it has a lot to do with speed and connectedness. So and complexity of your ecosystem where you're actually in. So more and more organizations, they feel that somehow they're not being adaptive enough. They can't react fast enough. That maybe the decision making is not really following up. So what the needs are in their ecosystem and stuff like that. And a lot of that is connected with the digital age. But then again, what is the digital age? When did that start? I was born in the 80s. There was a lot of digital stuff in the 80s even. So, and I was raised in the 90s. So there's a lot of stuff you can refer to as digital back then. I guess it has a lot to do with the high-speed internet, which is actually adding to the total sum of information that needs to be processed in organizations. And I guess they struggle in processing all that information.
And what does digital transformation then mean? What are organizations up to nowadays? How do they need to transform? How do they need to change?
Yeah, what I think is that it's not actually about tools and methods, like, digital tools, but more on the root of collaboration itself. How do we connect? How do we interact? What is leadership? What is power? What is authority? And the most interesting organizations, or also organizations I feel drawn to and work and like to work with them, are those who have this feeling of somehow this leadership thing doesn't work for us anymore, and why can't we just build structures and let them take the decisions and have more decentralization in how we work and how we take decisions? This notion of can we break that? Can we build something different?
As I mentioned at the beginning, there is one line of discussion which really divides the experts into two groups. The question is, if you had to choose on what to work on first, the mindset of people or the structures and processes of organizations, what do you need to focus on first as a company leader? So is it first the consciousness, as I said, or is it first the being? So what's your take? And maybe that's a weird question, but where should companies start, with mindset or with structures?
No, it's not a weird question. Actually, I think it's a very good one. And there's different takes on that. For instance, if you are in the holacracy movement, so you can hear Brian Robertson say, change the behavior first and let the mindset follow. And I think this is really interesting. If you imagine you want to change the mindset, how you do that? And on the other hand, if you have some new experiences and maybe then after that you can reflect on the experiences, what is different here, and maybe also feel some irritation and build on that to start the learning process there. That would be more in the way of there's new behavior, which is maybe imposed somehow. But if you take this as a challenge and then you say like, yeah, let's reflect on it. In my work, I've seen like both ends of those. So, and I think it needs to be connected somehow. What I'm pretty sure is at some point you can't go further with values-based leadership, authentic leadership, and still being in this pyramid power structure. When you start turning around the structure and you start building maybe a role-based organization with decentralized autonomous teams, then there you enter a new stage of learning, and people are likely to either accept that as a learning path, or maybe dropping out and saying, this is not where I want to go.
Yeah, it's interesting. I start reflecting on it while you're talking, because for a long time, the running paradigm is that really mindset determines everything. So if you change mindsets of people, everything will follow. But I see you have a point, or I see Brian Robertson has a point. Probably it's a weird question then because probably you have to do both at the same time. I mean, you can't just change structures. I mean, that has been done for decades. I mean, the whole lean management and restructuring movement, which we had in the 80s and 90s, was all about changing structures, but it didn't change the fundamentals of companies. Maybe it added a little bit to profitability, but it didn't really fundamentally change organizations.
Well, I guess there will be a change anyway, but the question is how consciously do you focus on it? So are there, reflection rooms or spaces for reflection as a group where you can learn together? Or is it just something you leave the people to it, and maybe it happens somewhere, but not really in a shared space? Because imagine if you need to move to a new town, or I don't know, whatever behavior changes you have in your private life, there's also all the time some behavior changes. If you enter a new relationship, or you enter a new job or whatever, you start to behave differently because you adapt to this ecosystem there. So I guess you can't really disconnect the two of them, but only to focus on let's do mindset work, I imagine that's pretty hard.
Yeah. Of course, there are different models of governance reform. Holacracy is obviously one which has been very popular over the last years, or let's say it gained a lot of press. I'm not quite sure whether the hype is already over or not. The other one is sociocracy, which has been there for a longer time and had some adaptations recently. I will put some links into the show notes, which are on changedays.com/podcast. Let's start like this. What are the commonalities of those different approaches? What are they trying to achieve?
I think what they are trying to achieve is to just distribute power and authority in a new way. For instance, holacracy basically grew out of sociocratic ideas. Some tend to fight each other with holacracy, sociocracy. You know, I feel like it's more interesting if you integrate them and look at the basic principles, which are like consent decision-making and then again role-based organization or distributed authority in circles. And it's not really this power structures we used to. If this organization thing is built in a metaphor of machine, you end up in one kind of certain way how you do things. And if organization was not a machine but a living organism, a living thing, so where do you end up? And I guess this is this idea of trying to build an organization like an organism, you know, with distributed authority, but a certain rule set also.
Let's go a little bit more into detail, because I think some of our listeners will have some knowledge about these approaches, others won't. So let's debunk it a little bit. You used a couple of buzzwords which are unfortunately not on the bingo, but I have already crossed some.
Me too.
So, so one was consent principle, distributed decision-making. The other one was role-based organizations. Let's start maybe with the second one. Define a little bit role-based organization in the sense of holacracy or sociocracy. What does that mean?
This is a perspective of looking at the organization, and to not map out in the org chart what are the people and where are they. So, you know, you are my boss and then you have your boss and so on, but more to look at the work. So what is the work needed to fulfill the purpose of the organization? And then to map that out in a certain role sets where you have accountabilities, which is really to be accountable. So you can count on those role fillers to do the actual work which is there. So if you look at the org chart, you see the roles first and not the people. And this is maybe something irritating at first, but then it allows to kind of map out what is the work needed to be done to follow the purpose of the company. This is role-based, and then at the same time, it allows to also distribute authority. And let's say this role is accountable for whatever, and you can take all the decisions, or there is a certain level you need to integrate others, and then you can take this decision rather than having just this rather rigid org chart which stays the same and they have clear lines of control and power.
What is the fundamental difference between, let's say, a classical job description and a role description?
Well, one is when you have a job description, I guess you have like, I don't know, two pages of whatever descriptions. What is your job? And with a role-based companies, you have like a certain role set, which can also change over time. So let's say I have 5 or 6 roles, and maybe then there are new roles created in certain meetings where we check, do we still have the structure we need? So this is more fluid, more adaptive, and the roles will change over time, and certainly change in a more decentralized way. That what I experienced in, let's say, the job descriptions, there needs to be a big project, usually driven by HR, where all the job descriptions will be renewed like every, 2 or 3 years. And in this take, it's distributed. So every team decides what are the roles we need to do our work. And maybe we need new one. Maybe we need to change just one accountability slightly in order to have more transparency and to be more clear about what we can expect of each other. And there's no central steering. This is really in self-autonomous groups.
Let's come to the second point, which is consent decision processes. What's that?
Yeah, this is simply the the decision-making process, which is a very basic principle of sociocracy, and also you will find it in holacracy, that decisions aren't taken in a democratic way. So it's not about the majority. There aren't taken in consensus. So it's not like you need everyone to be in order to do something, but rather you ask a question. So do you see any reason this could cause harm if we take that decision? And if yes, you have an objection, or if no, you see no harm, it is safe enough to try, then let's do it. So you don't need everyone to say yes, you just need no one to say no. And what you get usually with that is faster decision making, but also more adaptiveness. So you can also change this decision if you feel like it wasn't a good decision. Let's change it maybe in a month from now. Whereas if you have a big voting democratic decision, or if you have consensus seeking decision, or just, I don't know, autocratic decision, usually it takes a lot more to change the decisions. Again, that's what I experienced. And the basic principle is not everyone is in. The basic principle is there an objection? And if not, let's try it out.
I would be curious to see how that works. So let's try it out and simulate in a mini version this kind of decision making.
Okay.
Let's imagine we would have structured the change days organization along holacracy, and I have given the authority to choose the venue for our events to my co-worker. Her name is Lyra. Mm-hmm. Lyra comes up with a new venue which we haven't tested before, and she wants that we would move our event to this new venue. Would that be a good example?
So in this example, she is in charge of the venue and location. So this is her role.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And what would your role be then?
I'm in charge of the program.
Okay. So let's imagine we are in this meeting situation and your colleague just raised that proposal. And then we get to the part where there is the objection round. So I would ask everyone this question: do you see a reason why adopting this proposal causes harm or moves us backwards? Objection or no objection? So Holger.
Oh yes, I have an objection, because we have been doing our events at the same venue for many years. Everything works well there. The staff is reliable, and I don't want to risk that we cause any delays in bookings and any other problems.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's just ask me a few questions, then we can find out together if this is a valid objection. So is your concern a reason the proposal causes harm, or is your concern the proposal is unneeded or incomplete?
I don't know. It could cause harm, but I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. And if so, what's the harm?
The harm is that the organization of the entire event doesn't work as planned, and that we get a bad feedback from our participants.
Do you know this impact that you're describing will occur, or are you anticipating this is likely to occur?
I'm anticipating.
And if anticipated, could significant harm happen before we can adapt, or is it safe enough to try knowing we can revisit it anytime?
I think I would need some adaptation or some test runs before we can make the decision.
You anticipated that there is likely a harm to occur. So could significant harm happen before we can adapt? So that means there is a harm and we can't really react, and it happens. So we don't have the possibility to change anything. Or is it safe enough to try and knowing we can still change it later anytime?
I think significant harm can happen, because once we have made the decision, there is no way back.
So would the proposal limit one of your roles, or are you trying to help another role or the circle in general?
It would not limit my role. I'm trying to help another role.
Okay, then you've just told me this is not a valid objection.
Okay. Right, tell me why.
So this is really an interesting one, and it's what we talked about earlier about the role-based organization. So this is really distributed authority. So an objection this is just holacracy, right? You can also do it differently, but with holacracy, an objection has to be grounded in one of your roles. So actually, the question: would the proposal limit one of your roles? Yes, it would. You know, I'm in charge of the program. I can't deal with a new venture or whatever. Would have been fine to have a valid objection, but you just say, no, I'm just trying to help marketing, because I imagine it is super hard for marketing then to deal with stuff. well, okay, but then marketing has to bring that up themselves. It may sound weird at first, but it's just really the consequence of having distributed authority.
Yeah, and I'm really getting your point, because once I delegate authority, so to say, I hand over authority to another role, that's it. I don't have to mingle into the authority. Otherwise, it means I don't trust the system and I don't trust the other person.
And what I do here as a facilitator is I'm not judging, actually. I'm just following the process. And if whatever answer you give me, I won't kind of test the logical of your answer. I just go with the question. So if you had said, yeah, I'm responsible for all the change days, and that would limit my role of host of the change days, whatever, this is fine. So, and then after that, what happens is not that the decision is like, it's not a veto, it's not stopped. You go to an integration to find a solution that like kind of solves both of their tensions. And this is also something new, that you can't really stop a decision-making process. That's why it's called an integrative decision-making, where you integrate the objections and rather than stopping when one raises an objection.
What is your experience, how people react? Because old rules are replaced with new rules. And I remember when I started to work a long time ago, I worked for an organization which had a very thick book. It was a red book, a binder, in which all the organization rules were written down. That was at the time before intranet and internet existed. So it was reprinted. And of course, this is not the case anymore in most organizations, but still you have rules which are usually to be found in the intranet. So what's the reaction of people if you or the management comes and says, okay, these were the old rules and here are the new rules?
The hardest part is not the learning of the new rules, but the unlearning of the old ones. So I guess there is a certain phase you need to just stick to the process and try to overwrite the old rules by doing that. But then there's also different ways how you introduce the new rules. So for instance, I'm working with a company for a bit over a year now, and they started off being, let's say, more democratic in their decision making, and then they realized we can't just take votes on everything. We have to have some distribution of decision making, but they didn't want to go with holacracy at first, and then they started to kind of build up their own system, and just to start by mapping out their structure in circles in a big whiteboard in the entrance hall of their building. And we started to kind of doing this actualization of the circle structure once a month in front of that kind of big whiteboard in the entrance hall. And I would use some similarity of a process like we just did, but without the questions of testing what is a valid objection. And then they experienced this for, let's say, half a year. It was like last summer, basically, until fall. And then they experienced this and they felt, well, we need more rules about this. What is a valid objection? We're all standing in front of this big whiteboard. Why can't we do it in small groups? And then again, what are the groups? And so that's how they slowly, as a company as a whole, they realized we need more rules on this. And then they started to write their rule book and realized, well, actually what we see with holacracy and sociocracy and stuff is really good. So they kind of took inspiration there, and now they came up with a rule set, and all the people are like, yes, finally we have rules. So for this self-organization thing, now we have rules. Wow, finally. So this is just a different take than just come, in early in the morning, Monday morning, I'm here. Hi, this is the new rules, so let's do it. It takes a lot of time, and you can also do this process differently. And I think this is a beautiful example of it wasn't intentionally, but the people then actually, they felt the need for this rule set. And then it's a totally different change process.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking while you were talking. It takes a lot of time. So my next question would be, under which circumstances would you not recommend to implement such a system?
This transformation, it takes a lot of time, as you just also mentioned. And actually, it's much more work than you might think, but it's not as much work as you might be afraid of to do. So, but then again, if you can't really invest, and I don't mean invest, you need all expensive consultants and stuff, but you need to invest in the learning process, get the people together, talk about the stuff, maybe at some points have some coaching sessions, do some training, what you do in a change process. And if you don't have either the money or the time to do that, I guess it won't work. And so if you're really under big pressure and you need to change, we need change in 6 months. That's not going to happen. It takes much longer. And also it takes some investment, and you need a solid base to start at.
Yeah, it sounds to me a little bit like a killer argument, Daniel, because in the moment, most companies are under pressure. And obviously, if this would be just an approach under good weather conditions, no company could really adopt it.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. So this is for big corporations. This is the big challenge I see, that they talk about we need to be more agile, and in this there's also a lot of pressure somehow in it, and also some urgency. But then again, at the root, this isn't about being agile. This is about mindset and beliefs. So, and this just takes a lot of time. And how can you deal with that? So, you can do a lot to be more agile. If you look at what software development has done in the last 15 years, all the Scrum world and stuff, and SAFe and the scaled agile frameworks that are out there. I don't see the power structures change so fast in big organizations. Let's see. You mentioned that I worked with Swisscom, and that these are 20,000 people, and there's one CEO on top. So you can't just get rid of the CEO and start working in circles just by that. And we did run some experiments with holacracy, but then there's still this clash of cultures, and that's a big challenge. But I don't really have the answer. My focus just is on small companies to start there and to see where this all goes.
No suggestion for big companies? What should big companies do in these times of disruption?
Well, one suggestion I can make is to start experimenting, but then also to have some ground rules of what this experiment can do and what it can't. And I think there's a lot of learning opportunities there. So to find an area where you can really experiment, and then to really authorize the people there to run this experiment, let's say for 2 years at least, to have some learning lab, and not stop too early. I think that's the suggestion I can give. Yeah.
Daniel, next I would like to talk with you about the book you suggested for our reading list. And our listeners will find the title and the links on our show notes, which is changedays.com/podcast. It's about books which had an impact on our show guests. I'm trying to read them all, or at least to get an idea. And I read the one you suggested from beginning to the end. The title of the book is The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible by Charles Eisenstein. And we really have to talk about that. I rarely debate books with my guests, but for this I have a strong urge. Eisenstein was actually on my reading list for a while, and now thanks to you I came to read him, and I must say reading the book was quite an experience and an emotional roller coaster. I was going back and forth between what a new age crap, although he tries to distance himself from New Age, but not very successful in my mind. And on the other side, I thought beautifully written, captivating, partly convincing. I found some good quotes, which I will even use in my work. The more I read, however, the more furious I got. Let me quickly summarize it, and then I'll hear from you what you say about the book. So Eisenstein talks about the old story in which we have been living for thousands of years, the story of progress, growth, and prosperity, in which we are separated from the essential things like relationships and nature. He calls it the story of separation. And he tells us we should start to put a new story on top of it, the story of interbeing. What is it that fascinates you about the book, and how did it impact you?
I think this is really this thought, what you just mentioned, of those two stories, and knowing that it's never as easy as that. But what I really like there is this this idea that we're all living in a big story that we created ourselves, so as a species. But that's thousands of years ago already, or at least hundreds of years ago. And this is this story of separation, which he talks about, where we are actually not only separated from other people or separated from parts of ourselves, but also separated from nature. Why that did stick with me is that I also get this feeling that we talk about our planet and we talk about nature like it's something we can, possess. This is the resources, or this is in German you have this word Umwelt. So this is something that is surrounding us, but it's not that we are part of it. But I think we are very much a part of nature. And so what happens if we take the perspective there that we are part of nature and we are connected with everything, and in ways we can't really logically explain. And so this is this story of interbeing, what he calls it. And I think this is a very interesting thought. And what I see in all these movements happening, like responsive organization, reinventing organization, which is the phrase of Thiel organization with the book of Frederick Laloux and stuff. For me personally, this is what I see in this movement, that it is more about getting over this story of separation, also in the professional work, and starting enacting this story of interbeing, of being connected.
I'm happy to connect to the story of interbeing, and there's a lot of very nice ideas and quotes. He talks about, for example, that small acts of kindness can change the world, which I really like. Mm-hmm. Or at another point, he has this quote, which I really love, where he says, "The heart knows, but the mind believes." And I think that's really true, because we know from neuroscience that the mind only believes, the mind only constructs what it thinks is reality. The one thing where I really get mad, or where I really kind of exit the story, is when he talks about the future society, and he talks about, let's say, psychopaths and evil, and the idea that we just need to construct a new society and then we can eradicate, or at least mitigate or diminish major part of evil and psychopathology. To me, sounds like a socialist paradise. I mean, it has been tried before. I'm not quite sure whether we should start the same experiment again.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. As a Swiss, I didn't read it that way. So, and I wasn't, of course, like, we don't have like history as Germany has. And yeah, how I see it, I can really connect to that thought, but I don't take it too literally. So, if I think about, you mentioned evil in the world or whatever. So, on a more systemic perspective, what happened there? So what is the history of this family? What is the history of this human being and the generations before, and the surroundings, the society that the person was brought up, that somehow this person had to choose this path, or just ended up in this path of, as we refer to, being evil. And I can imagine that by building this kind of other society, and knowing that it will possibly take hundreds of years to do that, if ever we're going to do that, we can also react differently and have more opportunities to kind of get this person in connection again, and to have some sort of healing process.
Daniel, how did we score on the buzzword bingo? I must say I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 crosses. You used agile, digital transformation, self-organization, values, and complexity. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to shop bingo because there was always one one quadrant missing.
Yeah,
what about me?
I only have two, but I have to admit, I might have forgotten some.
I was trying to get you into mentioning the word disruption, because then I would have had a bingo.
I didn't
follow my path. Daniel, I would like to talk with you about your music, at least briefly, because that's part of you. You are about to publish the third album after Songs for Weddings and Funerals, and the second one was Where Are the Songs of Spring, and the third album has the title Songs for the Living. Beautiful album titles and beautiful song titles and nice songs. You're a real singer-songwriter. Tell me a little bit, what does that music mean to you, and what do you want to express?
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. I'm glad you like it. Well, it changed over time. You know, music was very important when I was like in my 20s, in my early 20s. And but that isn't the music you can listen now online. So maybe that was the start of this music. So, and as we talked about this transformation of I was working in the bank and then quitting my job and going to study psychology. My music back then was really like like a diary of this journey, personal journey, and also, of course, all about girls. To find love and to find out who am I and how can I be and how can I be with someone. Then it changed somehow, and now it's still a lot about girls. And but it's not like I'm feeling sad or whatever, and I think you can hear that in the songs also. And I think that the take on how I did my music is the most important to me. I decided I had opportunities to connect with performing artists in Switzerland, and then they would build connections to whatever record companies, but I just didn't feel that is my path. So I chose to be a do-it-yourself musician, and rather than looking at big festivals and trying to get a spot there to play, I took the path of playing house concerts. Until like 2 or 3 years ago, I played many house concerts in Switzerland. I even did a house concert tour in Germany once, which was great. And it's just so different how you get in touch with people, and that's what I like, how there is this connection through the music. And I think also my music, since it is rather calm and personal, really fits well with living rooms rather than big concert halls. And that's maybe also your very first question is what are you proud of? And I am proud of this space I created there for me and my music, which feels really comfortable and also natural to me.
And let's listen to one of your songs a little bit.
Free my dad's subconscious, and I give up all my sins. I keep washing my own feet with the meaning and the plan. I free my whole apartment off these long and winding stairs, and there never was a minute to go back where I ran. And she hung me up, she strung me up, she swung me up and down, but I'm never going to reach her but now.
Let's quickly talk about the music you contributed to our Spotify playlist, and our listeners will also find this link to the Spotify playlist on our website, changedays.com/podcast. You contributed 3 songs. The first one is Bright Eyes, old soul song for the New World Order. Big Thief by Shark Smile, and Getting Better by the Beatles. Choose one you want to talk about a little bit.
Well, then I have to choose the Beatles then.
Okay, why did you choose the Beatles? Actually, it's the second Beatles song we have in our playlist. We also have Let It Be.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, well, that was the starting of my doing music thing. So I was in a band in my early 20s. I think we started the band when I was 18, and we did play a lot of, music from the 50s and the 60s, and which seemed somehow odd to many people. Why would young guys play that music which is that old? But I just think this music is great, and it is so alive, and still today it is so alive. And also how they kind of built their career and what happened there. So I chose that one, and it is super hard to choose a Beatles song. So my opinion is the best Beatles record is always the one you're just listening to. So, and I chose the song Getting Better, because I think, yeah, I agree. It's getting better all the time. Really, it is. And then again, this is from Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which is the first record they published after stop playing concerts. So they, at one point, they were super successful, one of the most successful bands in the world, and they stopped playing concerts. Why? So because they felt a different path for them. That's pretty inspiring, I think, not to just go with the mainstream, and that's why I chose the song of that record.
Daniel, you have been a facilitator at the Buildin Change Days some years ago. Describe the experience you had.
I really like the atmosphere, the overall hosting of the Change Days. I think it was really great. And then again, there were some times where I felt somehow lonely, which is weird. And we didn't talk about that earlier. So I just feel safe enough to say so now, because that happens to me sometimes. And it also sticks with me somehow. And I keep reflecting on it, in this change conference. It could be any change conference, actually. And there's many people who do great work, amazing work in that field. And then somehow I feel what I see on leadership and organization, and then in this field I'm focusing, in distributed authority. I'm still with the minority of change workers or whatever, facilitators in this area. And sometimes it's difficult to connect to other people who do similar work. Even we share a great deal of what we do in our work. But then again, there's sometimes situations where I somehow feel I'm pretty alone in what I see, and I'm not sure how I can build on that. So that is something that did stick with me at the Change Days too, and seeing that there is also a transformation happening in what is change and how is organization actually structured. And in this field of distributed authority, many people talk about self-organization and agile and stuff. And there you can just cross out 2 on the bingo. And
I've got them.
I got them already. But at the root, and it is sometimes hard to describe what it is for me. It is rather a feeling, what I feel I want to contribute to. And this is also when we talked about Eisenstein and stuff. Sometimes it's really hard to find words for that. And I'm trying to learn and to get better in connecting and finding the right words.
Daniel, it has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. So much to think about, so much to go deeper. And I'm looking forward for our next conversation where we can really broaden the conversations about self-organizations, agility, ownership, technology, and whatever other words, and look at the right approaches to bring change to the world. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you for having me. It was great, and I really enjoyed our conversation.